Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural episode number 1 of the IBM Storage CephCAST. Yes, that's right. We're expanding our portfolio of offerings and video assets to include a new product set or a new solution, Ceph, which is great. I'm psyched to do this. We've been talking about it for a while.
Randy, I think you did that on purpose, though, so you don't have to remember the big number.
Yeah, that's exactly right. As Pete well knows, I struggle mightily with remembering the episode numbers as we do the Fusion Cast. We're up to 40 now, so the next one will be number 40. So 1 is way easier. So single digits are easier. So anyway, we're happy to be joined today by Marcel Hergarden, who's a product manager and sales enablement black belt for IBM Storage Ceph, who joined us from Red Hat at the beginning of the year. Marcel, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Marcel's been driving a lot of the content and messaging around this 6.1 release of Ceph, which is pretty significant. And Marcel, correct me if I'm wrong, it was announced today, correct? So we're getting it hot off the presses, right?
Yeah, it's the 18th of August today, 2023, and we're really delighted and happy to release the major release of IBM Storage Ceph 6.1. That may sound confusing because you think 6.1, hey, that's a point release. No, it isn't, because we started in IBM back in March with IBM Storage Ceph version 5.3. That was the first initial IBM Storage Ceph release, and now we are going from 5.3 onwards to 6.1. There is no 6.0, so 6.1 is the first major release update actually inside IBM. So I hope that explains a little.
That's cool, and it's significant. You know, it's a big day because I mean, you know, the efforts that you guys have put in to kind of, you know, blue wash is the term we tend to use, is kind of get the products into the IBM, you know, pipeline and workflow and development cycle is, you know, not always an easy task. So you guys have really nailed it. So let's talk about the release. So version 6.1 announced today. There are a slew of new features around functional capabilities, performance, ease of use, ease of implementation. So let's just kind of crank through them. So starting with functionality, Ceph ADM is one of the big ones. Can you give us a little breakdown on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Ceph ADM, what is it? It's actually a utility that can be used to deploy and manage a IBM Storage Ceph cluster. And that's for what we call day 1 management, so the setup and initial configuration, but also the day 2 setup. So if you want to make changes or additional things afterwards, you can perfectly use Ceph ADM. And it's tightly integrated with both the command line interface, but also with the graphical UI. So the Ceph Storage Dashboard web interface that has a UI. And from that perspective, you can also use Ceph ADM to manage multiple storage clusters even from within either environment. So you can configure replication, for instance, object replication between 2 distinct clusters, and then from each different cluster, you can actually run Ceph ADM and manage things happening across these clusters where it comes to replication.
Nice. That's really good because, you know, a lot of people, you know, want to see the GUI and play with it, but in reality, a lot of people use the CLI to manage things at scale. So it's really good that we got both of those.
Well, let's be honest. GUIs are for you know, amateurs, right? Those of us who are hardcore are CLI guys.
Right.
I wouldn't say that amateurs,
joking,
but
of course.
It gives an insight. It's maybe somewhat convenient, but if you are talking about automating things and scripting stuff, then that's where these tools come to their place fully.
We have a new saying lately: everything as code. That's kind of our mentor. That's our mantra right now. So let's move on and talk a little bit about some of the Rados Gateway enhancements. There's a bunch of changes in there too.
Yes, there are some new feature functionalities actually in the Rados Gateway. One of them is actually policy-based data archive or migration to public cloud. And we GA this now for Amazon AWS S3. There you can state a policy if you have objects or data in your cluster that is not often or frequently touched or used, and it's older data that sits there and occupies space. You can define a policy, and if the policy is meeting the criteria, then it will archive or migrate data from your Ceph cluster onto public cloud. and it can sit there in let's say cheaper S3 storage like Glacier and those kind of things. So you can really maintain it for a long time if it's not frequently used, without having to invest in an archive solution and have that on-prem in your systems, maintain that. So now with this feature, you have a policy where you can define data archive or migration to public cloud. For now, it's for Amazon AWS, it's general available. For Azure, it's tech preview to come available in the next release.
Awesome. That sounds like something that I suspect would be of some interest to the Watson X .data community. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but that certainly sounds like a feature that would be very beneficial in those deployments.
Yeah, because then you can remain to have all your data on-prem. It's still available and accessible also through your IBM storage Ceph environment, actually.
Okay, and there have also been some performance and ease of use enhancements. So let's break those down and talk a little bit about, let's do performance first, I guess. There's a new quality of service capability now.
Yeah, that quality of service has either two sides. It's for the internal services. There is a quality of service setting there, actually. And that means that if something happens in a cluster, for instance, a reconfiguration or something happens internally, that is no longer allowed to consume a whole lot of resources. That's now kept into the amount of resources that is decent for those processes, so that they cannot eat all the CPU and memory and take performance away from user interactions with the system. Yeah. So that's one. But on the other hand, they have also guaranteed resources, so that those internal services will always be guaranteed to work well. So if we, let's say, would load the cluster with an external load, then those services might become in a smaller environment. But now this is kept by quality of service, so that works both ways. They cannot consume all the available resources. On the other hand, they have guaranteed resources now, so that's twofold.
Or a good governance story there. So awesome.
Yeah.
And what about Parquet support? This is another biggie for obviously for Watson X and others, but let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Parquet support is now in the Rados gateway. So you have your Ceph system, the Rados system, and on top of that, there's the Rados gateway, which then provides S3 capabilities to end users, to the clients. And that now also supports Parquet. And Parquet is a typical a way of talking to these Apache applications who support that. And then you can use S3 select statements. Well, that's a whole mouthful. What does it mean? Actually, now suppose you have buckets with big amount of objects, then for each interaction, you would have to retrieve everything that's in that bucket, but that's not efficient. So now you can state like SQL-alike commands, so that you do a selection of what's in that bucket and only retrieve what is really needed. And that's called S3 select. And this is now supported from the Rados gateway, and you can launch your Parquet commands against the Rados gateway. And that means that you don't have to go into each individual application who is talking that language, but you can do it immediately from your Rados gateway. And that saves actually performance, and that brings also along more efficiency, if that makes sense.
This is really exciting, Marcel, because as you know, I mean, over the past several years, we've done a lot of benchmarking of Ceph, particularly around object storage, which is really a strong point, with Rados Gateway. And we've beat everybody out there, hands down, with the performance. And now, I mean, we're not resting on our laurels. We're adding more and more of these capabilities like S3 Select, which are only going to improve the level of performance that we're going to be able to deliver for these big data workloads, which is, the whole Watson X topic, Randy. So, there you go. There's your segue.
All roads lead to Watson X. Yeah.
Exactly.
Before we get a little bit more on that, quickly on security, I know there's some new key rotation features and server-side encryption options. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. First, the key rotation. Ceph has an internal authentication system that's on the Ceph internal side, and that's named CephCAST, that uses encryption and secrets for use inside the system. So it's a whole internal processes, and that works with authentication keys, which are unique. Now you have an ability to rotate those keys from the outside. So if you have your company has a policy that appliances or systems that use encryption keys and they need to be rotated, now you can do that easily from the Ceph ADM interface. So you have an ability to rotate keys on request by external user, and that's something new that's now available from version 6.1.
Cool.
Nice.
So Randy, before we go on though, there was one thing I want to go back to that you touched on a little bit, and I think Marcel covered this too, but the multi-site replication capabilities also, which I think are going to play a significant role in, the disaster recovery solutions that we're delivering together with Fusion. And I wanted to just touch on that point because I think it's a very important point.
All right. So one of the new things that we also have in this release is multi-site replication with bucket granularity. And before this release, you also had this Rados gateway replication, but that always concerned entire namespaces. So that were all the buckets were replicated, and it could be bidirectional, of course, between two or more clusters. And now you can do that on a bucket granularity. So that means you can do selective replications, which can also be bidirectional. And this makes this very useful for branch offices, co-offices, edge locations where you want to replicate against, and you don't want to replicate the whole bunch of data, but only the data that is actual important and relevant here. So this is new functionality, which is now available, and customers can use this from now on.
Very cool.
Awesome.
All right, so let's circle back to watsonx. So our wall-to-wall watsonx coverage continues. Pete, tell us about the entitlements that come with watsonx for storage technologies that are relevant here, and then we'll kind of go into a close.
Absolutely. I mean, the two best technologies, right? Fusion for containers and Ceph, and really Ceph is well known for its object storage support, but Ceph is multi-protocol. It supports block, file, and object. All are equal citizens within Ceph, and you get all of those capabilities together. So as part of watsonx, you get 100 terabytes entitlement to Fusion. And you also, in addition to that, wait, there's more, you get 500 terabytes of Ceph also, so we're kicking people off in the right way and, basically giving them free access to this really cool technology. Yeah. Now we know, that you're going to need more, right? I mean, data, it multiplies like rabbits, and you're going to need more eventually in the future. And the good news is we're here, and these solutions, both Ceph and Fusion, are easy to grow, easy to scale. That's one of the key points about both.
Yeah, great point. And they're definitely starter amounts, and these environments by their very nature are going to grow very rapidly typically. So, the customer is going to outgrow those initial entitlements pretty quickly. So great opportunity for us to go in and upsell additional capacity to them. So great land and expand story there. So this is exciting. This is a big release. You guys have spent a lot of energy getting it ready, getting it through the pipeline, and launching it. So congratulations. This is an exciting release. I think we're going to be talking about a bunch more topics going forward. We're psyched to be adding this new series to the media landscape, as it were. I know in the future, Marcel, we want to talk a little bit about, and we won't do it now, but we'll just kind of tease it a little bit. We want to talk about, the age-old question of why don't I just use open source? Like, why do I need to go to a commercial provider as opposed to open source? So, right, that's something, I know that's a topic of interest to you and something you're passionate about. So,
well, the other thing we can talk about is virtual machine support, which I know is also new in Ceph 6.1. Yes. But, that's a key area for us going forward for both Fusion and Ceph.
Yeah. To add on to that, Pete, that is, of course, it was already possible to install Ceph in VMware, but then there were some things to be aware of, and you always needed to have local storage on your VMware server to do so, and that's now gone. So now you can just do that in a supported way, but it's for DR purpose only. So please don't use that for real production where you need to have the full performance, etc. But if you want to have a DR cluster, to have a secondary copy of your data and run that on a virtual environment like VMware, fully supported from now on. You can do that without support exception, and before you needed an exception, and now that's done. So now you can do this in a supported way, actually.
Nice. So the guardrails are in place. That's good. All right. Well, so I know there are other features which we didn't have time to get into today, but I would encourage folks to go Check out the launch materials on Seismic. I'll put somewhere on the screen here, I'll put some QR codes that will link you to those assets. Definitely go check them out. Marcel, thanks for joining us and for kicking off the series in a big way.
Thank you, guys.
We look forward to future episodes. Pete, thanks for jumping on. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.